Thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to Sleepy Tales of Lore podcast, where we listen to yarns of myths and legends passed down through the ages, narrated in a soft, slow, and almost hypnotic pace to put you into total relaxation and into a deep sleep even before the story ends. Can't you just feel your body craving such rest? I'm your host Declan, and I will be your narrator of tonight's sleepy podcast called The All-Knowing Man in the Crescent Moon, drawn from the warmth and wonder of moon folklore across the ages. Now get into your comfiest position, ready for getting sleepy, and let's get started with tonight's tale. Now, there are a great many things in this world that most people know about, without ever having stopped to think about them properly. The way bread smells when it is fresh from the oven, the particular sound that rain makes on a roof when you're warm and dry beneath it, the feeling of setting down something heavy that you have been carrying for a very long time. These are things that require no explanation and no particular attention. They are simply known, woven into the fabric of being alive on this particular planet, in this particular way, without any need for ceremony or announcement. The man in the crescent moon is one of those things. Everyone knows about him, has always known about him. From the very first night that the very first person looked up at the night sky and saw that great curved sliver of gold hanging there in the dark, serene and self-possessed and faintly, unmistakably, smiling, there has been the understanding, deep and quiet and requiring no proof, that someone lives there. Not a frightening someone, not a distant or indifferent someone, a warm someone, a patient someone, a someone who has been up there, looking down, for a very, very long time. His name, across the many languages and many centuries in which people have spoken of him, has taken many forms. Some have called him the Moon Man, some have called him the Night Keeper, some have called him, in languages so old they are no longer spoken by any living person, by names that translated, roughly and imperfectly, as something like the one who watches with kindness, for our purposes tonight. And he would not object to this. He is not a man who objects to much. We shall call him simply the Moon Man. He is old, older than any story told about him, which is saying something, given that the oldest stories told about him are older than writing, older than cities, older than the wheel. But he does not look old, or rather, he looks old in the way that certain things look old, in the way that mountains look old, or oceans look old, or the sky itself looks old, with a quality not of decay or diminishment, but of depth, of having accumulated over an unimaginable span of time so much of everything, so much seeing, so much knowing, so much patient and unhurried attention directed at the world below, that it shows not as lines or weariness, but as luminance. He glows with it, literally and figuratively and in every way that matters. He glows. His crescent, and it is always a crescent, always that curved and perfect sliver, never the full round disc that hangs in the sky at other times of the month, is his favourite form. He has explained this to those he has spoken to over the centuries, in various ways and with various degrees of detail. But the simplest explanation, and the one he seems most fond of giving, is this: that a crescent is a thing that is both present and absent at once, that it shows you part of itself while keeping the rest in shadow, that it is, like all the best things, enough to see clearly and enough to wonder about, and that this, he always adds, with that faint and settled smile, is a very good way to be. His position in the sky is specific. He does not drift or wander. He does not rotate or dip. He sits, as he has always sat, in the upper reaches of the night sky, cradled in his crescent the way a man might sit in a very comfortable chair. That has been shaped over many long years of use, precisely to the contours of him. His legs hang over the lower tip of the crescent, unhurried. His back rests against the upper curve. His hands, large hands, capable hands, hands that have a quality of warmth even from a great distance, rest in his lap or hang loosely at his sides, or occasionally, on certain particularly beautiful nights, reach out and rearrange a star or two, the way a person might idly straighten a picture on a wall as they pass it, not because it needs straightening, simply because they can. And his face is the face in the image that everyone carries inside them, whether they know it or not. The face that children draw instinctively when they draw the moon, not because anyone taught them to, but because the knowledge of it is already there, the way certain knowledge is already there, carried in us from the very beginning, round and golden and warm, with closed eyes that are not closed because he is sleeping. He very rarely sleeps. There is too much to attend to. But because he is listening, because he is receiving, taking in through whatever sense it is that beings of his kind use in place of ordinary hearing, the vast and continuous and, to him, entirely comprehensible murmur of the world below. Every question, every worry, every small and private hope, every whispered please, he hears them all. Every single one. Now, question that most people ask, when they have gotten past the initial and entirely reasonable wonder of the thing, is this: how does he know? It is a fair question, a very fair question indeed, because the knowing of the Moon Man is not ordinary knowing. It is not the knowing that comes from study, though he has had time enough for study beyond all imagining. It is not the knowing that comes from experience, though his experience of the world below, observed from his particular vantage point across an unbroken span of centuries, is so vast and so complete that the word experience seems, applied to it, rather modest. It is something older than both of those, something that does not have a very satisfactory name in any human language, though many have tried. The closest anyone has ever come, and this was a very old woman in a very small village, the western coast of Ireland who had spent 92 years looking up at the night sky, with the kind of attention that most people reserve for things much closer to their faces. The closest anyone has come is this description. She said, and she said it simply and without any particular drama, the way she said most things, that the Moon Man knows because he has been present for everything, for every birth and every ending, for every first step and every last word, for every moment of joy so large it had no container, and every moment of sorrow so deep it had no bottom. He has been there, up in his crescent, with those receiving eyes closed, and that warm and patient face tilted slightly downward, taking it all in, not judging any of it, not intervening in any of it, unless asked, simply witnessing. And witnessing, she said, is the deepest form of knowing there is. The Moon Man himself, on the occasions when he has been asked directly about the nature of his gift, tends to describe it differently. He tends to describe it in terms of light, which makes a certain sense, given where he lives. He says, and he says it in that unhurried way of his, as if the words are arriving in exactly the right order, at exactly the right pace, and there is no reason whatsoever to rush any of them. He says that his knowing is like moonlight itself, that it does not blaze, that it does not demand to be looked at directly, that it falls softly on everything it touches, illuminating without overwhelming, revealing without exposing, showing each thing as it truly is, rather than as the harsh light of day sometimes makes it appear. Moonlight, he says, is kinder than sunlight, and his knowing is kinder still. What he knows, specifically, is everything that matters. He is careful to make this distinction. He does not know, and has no particular interest in knowing, the things that do not matter. The price of grain in a market he has never looked at closely. The exact number of fish in a particular stretch of river on a particular Tuesday. The contents of letters that were never sent, and ledgers that were never opened. These things he waves away with one of those large and capable hands, in the gesture of someone setting aside a plate of food they have no appetite for. These things are not his concern. What is his concern? What has always been his concern? From the very first night he settled into his crescent and looked down at the world below with those warm and receiving eyes, is the inner life, the life that goes on behind the face, that the world sees, questions that are never spoken aloud, because there is no one to ask them to, or because the asking of them feels too large, or too private, or too uncertain of its welcome. The worries that wake a person at 3 in the morning and sit on the edge of the bed, in the dark, saying nothing, simply being there. The hopes so tender and so new that their owner hardly dares to look at them directly, for fear that the looking itself might somehow diminish them. These, he knows, every person's, every night, all of them, simultaneously, without confusion or error or omission, the way the sky holds all its stars at once, each one distinct, each one attended to, none of them missed. He knows the farmer in the west of Ireland who cannot sleep for worrying about his fields. He knows the young woman in a city apartment who sits at her window at midnight, wondering if she has made the right choice. He knows the old man on the bench in the park who comes every evening at the same hour and sits very still and looks at nothing in particular, and misses, with a completeness that has not diminished in 20 years, someone who is no longer there. He knows the child who is afraid of the dark, not because the dark contains anything frightening, but simply because it is dark. And being small in a large and dark world is a lot. He knows the dog curled at the foot of the bed, who lifts his head sometimes in the night and looks at the window with an expression of something, longing, perhaps, or recognition, or simply the awareness, felt in whatever way dogs feel such things, that there is something up there in the dark above the glass, something warm that knows his name. Because the Moon Man does not distinguish, has never distinguished, between the concerns of people and the concerns of animals. A worry is a worry. A need is a need. A heart, however it is constructed, however many or few chambers it contains, however it expresses itself to the world, is a heart. And every heart, as far as the Moon Man is concerned, is entirely worth his time. Now, the question of how he answers, how he takes what he knows and delivers it, quietly and without fanfare, to the person or the creature below who needs it, that is a different matter entirely. And that is where the story truly begins. Now, there was a farmer by the name of Seamus Connolly who lived on the western coast of County Clare, in a stone farmhouse that had been in his family for 4 generations, and showed every one of them in its walls. It was a good house, solid and low and deeply embedded in the hillside behind it, as if the hill itself had grown around it over the years and decided to keep it. The fields below it ran down toward the sea in long, irregular strips, green and grey and gold depending on the season, and beyond the fields, the Atlantic stretched away to the horizon in that particular shade of dark blue that exists, as far as anyone can tell, only on the western edge of Ireland, and nowhere else on earth. Seamus was a large, quiet man of 53, with hands the colour and texture of the stone walls he spent considerable portions of his life repairing, and a face that had been thoroughly and not unpleasantly rearranged by decades of Atlantic weather. He was not, by nature, a worrying man. He had the farmer's deep and practical relationship with uncertainty, the understanding, earned over long years of dealing with weather and soil and the various strong opinions of livestock, that most things work out, and those that don't can generally be managed, and those that can't be managed can at least be endured. He was not a man who lost sleep easily. And yet, for 6 weeks, on the occasion of his 53rd autumn, Seamus Connolly had been losing sleep dramatically, not the kind of sleeplessness that announces itself and demands attention. The quiet kind. The kind where you wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, for no reason you can name, and lie in the dark with the old farmhouse breathing around you, and the sound of the sea just audible if the wind was in the right direction, and a question, or the same question, every night. Sitting on the edge of the bed, in the way that questions do when they have decided they will not be ignored any longer. The question was this. His eldest son, Kieran, 26 years old, steady and capable and the image of his grandfather in the only photograph of his grandfather that existed, had been offered a position, a good position, in the city. Kind of position that a young man with Kieran's particular combination of intelligence and application was not offered twice. And Kieran, being the kind of young man who would not make a decision of this size without first consulting his father, had sat down across the kitchen table from Seamus one evening and laid the whole thing out, plainly and carefully, and asked him what he thought. And Seamus, who loved his son with the deep and inarticulate love of a man who has never been very good at saying so, had looked at Kieran across the table and felt 2 things simultaneously, each of them completely true and completely opposed to the other. He had felt pride, the fierce and almost painful pride of a father, looking at a son who has become, against all odds and by his own efforts, someone remarkable. And he had felt loss, the quiet, preemptive loss of a man who can see, very clearly, that something he loves is about to change, irrevocably, and who does not know, with any certainty, how to be glad about it. He had told Kieran because he was an honest man, and honesty had always been the currency of the Connolly household, that he needed time to think. And Kieran had nodded, being a patient young man, which he had learned from his father, and cleared the cups from the table and said nothing more about it. But the question had not gone anywhere. It had simply moved from the kitchen table to the edge of the bed at 2 in the morning, where it sat every night with its arms folded, patient and immovable and waiting. On the 43rd night of this arrangement, Seamus Connolly gave up on sleep entirely at 2:30. Pulled on his coat over his pyjamas, a garment combination he would not have entertained under any other circumstances, and went outside. The night was extraordinary, clear and cold and absolutely still. The sky above the hill behind the house so thick with stars that they seemed less like individual points of light and more like a texture, a quality of the sky itself. The sea below the fields was a dark and barely moving mass, its surface catching the starlight in long and shifting ribbons. The stone walls of the fields ran down the hillside in their familiar lines, pale and certain in the dark. And above it all, the crescent. He had seen it 10,000 times more. He had seen it from this exact hillside since he was a boy of 4, standing in this same dark inner coat pulled on over his pyjamas, because his father had brought him out to see the stars. He knew the crescent the way he knew the walls and the fields and the sound of the sea, with the bones, not the eyes. But tonight it seemed closer, larger, perhaps, or simply more present, as if it had leaned down the smallest fraction of a degree in the direction of his particular hillside on this particular cold and sleepless night. Seamus stood with his hands in the pockets of his coat and looked up at it. And then, because he was alone, and the night was very quiet, and 43 nights of the same question sitting on the edge of the bed will bring even a reserved man to certain extremities, he said it, out loud, to the crescent, to the warm and golden face tilted, just slightly, in his direction. What do I tell him? His voice in the night air was very small and very honest, and carried, in its 4 plain words, everything that 6 weeks of sleepless nights had been trying and failing to resolve. The crescent did not answer. Not in words, not immediately. What happened instead was this. The moonlight, that soft, particular, silver gold light that exists nowhere else in the range of light available to the world, shifted, not dramatically, not visibly, even to any eye that might have been watching. But Seamus felt it the way you feel a hand placed gently on your shoulder in a dark room, not startling, not demanding, simply there, a warmth on the back of his neck and across his shoulders and down into his chest, where it settled quietly around the thing that had been sitting there, knotted and unresolved, for 6 weeks. And in that warmth, not spoken, not written, not delivered in any form that Seamus could have described to another person and been believed, was an answer. Not the answer he had expected. Better than the answer he had expected. It came to him the way the best things come, not as a thought exactly, and not as a feeling exactly, but as something that combined both of those things and added to them a third thing, for which he had no name. A deep and settling certainty, the certainty that his son was not leaving the land, that the land was expanding, that every Connolly who had stood on this hillside before him had sent something of themselves outward into the world. A child, crop, stone wall built to last, and that this was no different, that love does not diminish by being sent out, that it returns, always, in one form or another. Seamus Connolly stood on his hillside for a long time after that. The cold did not bother him. The dark did not bother him. The knot in his chest, the one that had been there for 6 weeks, was gone. He looked up at the crescent one last time before going back inside. The warm and golden face was, as it always was, tilted slightly downward, eyes receiving, expression settled. Right then, said Seamus Connolly, to the Moon Man, in the quiet and certain way of a man who has just received exactly what he needed. He went back inside. He slept deeply and without interruption for the first time in 6 weeks. And in the morning, over the breakfast table, he told his son, "Go." Now, on the very same night that Seamus Connolly stood on his hillside in County Clare, with his hands in his coat pockets and his question in the cold air, on that same night, in a city several hundred miles to the east, a young woman named Aoif was sitting at her window. She was sitting at her window, in the way that people sit at windows at midnight, not looking at anything in particular, not expecting to see anything in particular. Simply there, present at the glass in the dark, the way you are present, sometimes at the edge of something large and unresolved, not ready to step back from it, and not ready to step into it, and occupying, for the time being, that particular and familiar narrow strip of in-between. Aoife was 29 years old. She lived alone in a third-floor apartment, in a tall and slightly tired building, on a street that was busy in the day and very quiet at night. And she had lived there for 3 years, and she had, for 3 years, been content, which was not the same as happy, and she knew this. And on most days, it did not bother her. And on some days, like this one, it bothered her considerably. Her question, the one that had brought her to the window at midnight, in her dressing gown with a cup of tea she had made and forgotten to drink, was not a simple one. It was the kind of question that sounds simple when you first become aware of it. Barely even a question, more of a murmur, a small and indistinct sound in the back of the mind, but which grows, if left unattended, into something considerably less simple, something that takes up more and more of the available space inside a person, until even their contented evenings and their productive days and their good and reliable friendships all feel slightly too small. The question was, is this enough? Not asked with dissatisfaction, not asked with ingratitude, asked with the genuine and open uncertainty of a person who is, sumigma, honest, enough to acknowledge that she does not know the answer, and who is sitting at a third-floor window at midnight, because she cannot sleep, and the question will not go away, and the cold tea in her hands is doing nothing useful, and she has run out of distractions. She looked up, as she sometimes did when the city's glow permitted it, at the sky above the rooftops. The city washed out most of the stars, as cities do, treating the night sky as if it were merely an inconveniently dark ceiling, in need of improvement. But the crescent was always there, too bright and too certain of itself to be washed out by anything as temporary and self-important as a city. It hung above the rooftops in its familiar curve, gold and steady, and Aoife looked at it, the way she often looked at it on sleepless nights, without any particular intention, without any particular expectation, simply because it was there, and it was constant. And constant things are comforting when most other things are not. The Moon Man, who had of course been aware of Awifa and her window and her cold tea and her question, long before she was aware of looking up at him, considered her for a moment. He considered the specific quality of her question, not the surface of it, which he had heard in 1,000 variations from 1,000 windows in 1,000 cities, but the particular texture of this version of it, which was hers, which had her shape, the shape of someone who had spent 3 years building something careful and sufficient, and was now standing back from it, and wondering, with complete sincerity and no small amount of courage, whether careful and sufficient was what she had actually come here to build. He decided, as he sometimes did with questions of this particular kind, not to answer it directly, because the direct answer, while he had it, and it was a good one, was not what she needed. What she needed was not an answer given to her, but an answer arrived at. There is a considerable difference between those two things, and the Moon Man, who has had considerable time to understand it, never confuses them. What he did instead was send her a dream. Not immediately. First, he waited, patient as only the Moon Man can be patient, while Awifa finished not drinking her tea, and set the cup on the windowsill, and leaned her forehead against the cold glass for a moment, in the way of someone giving themselves permission, finally, to stop thinking for the night. He waited while she went to bed. He waited while her breathing slowed, and her hands uncurled on the pillow beside her face, and the small tension around her eyes, the one she'd been carrying for 3 years, without quite noticing it, began, in sleep, to ease. And then, very gently, the way you might set something small and fragile into the open hands of someone sleeping, he gave her the dream. It was not a complicated dream. The Moon Man does not deal in complicated dreams. He finds them inefficient. The dream he gave Oif was, simple and complete and entirely her own, in the way that all the best things are entirely your own, even when they arrive from somewhere outside you. She dreamed she was standing in a garden, not a garden she recognized, though it had the feeling of somewhere deeply familiar, the way dreams sometimes offer you places that feel more like home than anywhere you have actually lived. The garden was in the early stages. The beds were dug but not planted. Paths were laid but not worn smooth. The gate at the far end stood open, not broken open, not forced open, simply open, waiting, and in her hands, she looked down at them in the dream and saw seeds. She woke at 7 in the morning, with the dream still present in her, vivid and warm and clarifying, Not clarifying in the sense that it had answered her question, clarifying in the sense that it had reframed it. The question was no longer, "Is this enough?" The question was now, "What would I plant?" And that, she discovered, sitting up in bed in the early morning light, with the city beginning its day outside her window, was a question she very much wanted to answer. Above the rooftops, the crescent had gone pale in the morning light, almost invisible now, as it always was by day, but there, still there, as it always was, as it always would be. Now, it should be said, because it is important and because the Moon Man himself would want it said, that of all the questions he receives on any given night, across all the rooftops and hillsides and windows and open fields of the world, the questions he is fondest of are the ones that come from children. Not because they are simpler. They are not simpler. If anything, and this is something the Moon Man has observed with great consistency across a very great many centuries, children ask the largest questions, the questions that grown people have generally learned through long practice and social necessity to stop asking, the questions that sit at the very bottom of everything, beneath all the practical questions and the reasonable questions, and the questions that have answers you can find in books or search for on screens, the ones that have been there since the beginning, vast and patient and entirely unresolved, waiting for someone brave enough or young enough to ask them. On this particular night, the child's name was Rosie. She was 7 years old, and she lived in a small house at the end of a long road in a town that was not large enough to have more than one of most things. One school, one post office, one bakery that smelled, on Thursday mornings, of something so good it was almost unfair. She had red hair and a gap between her two front teeth, and a serious expression that gave her face, even in repose, the quality of someone engaged in important internal work, which she usually was. She was supposed to be asleep. She was, very decidedly, not asleep. She was sitting up in bed, with her knees pulled to her chest, and her owl-patterned duvet tucked around her, and her eyes, very wide open, fixed on the ceiling above her. Not because anything was wrong, exactly. Not because she was frightened or unwell or upset. Simply because a question had arrived. The way questions arrive for certain kinds of people. And Rosie was very much that kind of person, without any preamble or apology. At whatever hour it saw fit, and with the clear expectation of being attended to. The question had arrived at 9:30 during the brushing of teeth, which was, as far as Rosie was concerned, one of the more reliable times for questions to arrive. Something about the rhythm of the brushing, or the relative quiet of the bathroom, or simply the fact that it was one of the few moments of the day when she was not required to be doing anything else with her mind, made it available. And into that availability, on this particular Tuesday evening, had walked the biggest question she had ever had. She had stood at the bathroom sink for a long time after she finished brushing, looking at her own reflection with that serious expression, toothbrush still in hand, turning the question over in her mind. She had considered asking her mother. Her mother was very good at questions, usually, but something about this one, its size, its particular quality of bigness, made her feel that it required a different kind of answerer, a larger kind, a kind that had perhaps been thinking about it for longer. She had gone to bed. She had lain down. She had, very reasonably, attempted to sleep, and the question, entirely unmoved by these efforts, had simply waited. At 10:30, she gave in. She sat up in bed, pulled the duvet around her, and looked at the window. Her curtains were thin. She had chosen them herself from a catalogue for their pattern of silver stars on dark blue, which had seemed at the time like the correct curtains for her. And through them, clearly and without effort, the light of the crescent fell. She looked at it through the thin, star-patterned curtains for a moment. Then she got up, quietly, because her parents were asleep and she was a considerate child, and went to the window and drew the curtain aside and looked up at the crescent directly. She had known about the Moon Man since she was 4, when her grandmother had pointed him out to her one clear winter night and told her, in the matter-of-fact way of someone sharing a piece of reliable, practical information, that he knew everything and was very easy to talk to, and never laughed at questions, no matter how big they were. Rosie had filed this information carefully, in the part of her mind reserved for things that were both true and useful, and she had not forgotten it. She looked up at the warm and golden face in the crescent. "Excuse me," she said, quietly, politely, in the tone she used when she wanted to make sure she had someone's full attention before proceeding. Then she took a breath, a small but serious breath, and she asked it, "Why is there something instead of nothing?" The night received this question with the silence it deserved. The Moon Man, who had, it must be said, been waiting for someone to ask him this particular question, with something approaching genuine enthusiasm, felt, in whatever way he felt things, a warmth that was additional hustle to his ordinary warmth. He looked at this small and serious child standing at her window, in her owl-patterned duvet, with her gap-toothed mouth set in that determined line, and he made a decision. He would not give her the answer. Not because he didn't have it. He had it. He had always had it. It was a very good answer. But he had learned, over a very long time, that certain questions are not for answering. Certain questions are for keeping, for carrying through your life. Like a lantern, not solved, not closed, but L-I-T, giving light to every room you enter, and every conversation you have, and every moment of your life, in which you are awake enough to wonder. What he gave her instead, delivered on the moonlight that came through her thin star-patterned curtains, as she climbed back into bed, delivered so gently and so specifically that it arrived feeling entirely like her own thought, was this. The feeling, warm and wide and luminous, that the question itself, was the most interesting thing about her, that a person who asks, why is there something instead of nothing, at the age of 7, standing at a window in an owl-patterned duvet at 10:30 on a Tuesday, is a person who will never be bored by being alive. Not for a single day. Not for a single hour. Rosie lay back on her pillow and looked at the moonlight making its slow patterns on her ceiling, through the star-patterned curtains. She said. It was a very small word, but it contained a great deal. She was asleep within 5 minutes, and she dreamed magnificently. Now, as has been established, and the Moon Man would want it thoroughly established, as it is a point he feels strongly about, he does not distinguish between the concerns of people and the concerns of animals. A worry is a worry. A need is a need. And the fact that an animal cannot articulate its need in words that a person would understand does not make the need smaller. It makes the need, if anything, more pressing, because it has no other avenue, no midnight conversation at a kitchen table, no window to sit at with a cold cup of tea, no words at all. Just the feeling and the crescent above. The Moon Man receives the communications of animals differently from the way he receives those of people. With people, there is always language. Even when the question is unspoken, it has been shaped by language, formed by it, given its particular outline and its particular weight, by the words that surround it, even in silence. With animals, there is no such shaping. What comes to him from the creatures of the earth is pure, unmediated, a direct transmission of state. Not what they think about their situation, but what their situation feels like from the inside, in the body, at this exact moment. He finds this clarifying. On this particular night, among the many thousands of animal transmissions arriving at his crescent from every corner of the world, the deep mammalian contentment of bears in their winter dens, the high, bright alertness of owls on their branches, the vast and ancient calm of whales moving through dark water. 3 in particular caught his attention. Not because they were the largest, not because they were the most urgent, simply because they were the most themselves. The first was a dog. His name, as given to him by the family who loved him, which was the only name that mattered, was Bramble. He was 11 years old, which is old for a dog of his size, and he knew it in the way that old dogs know it, not with fear or resistance, but with the deep and settled acceptance of a creature that has always been, more or less, at peace with the way things are. He was a large dog, brown and slightly grey at the muzzle now, and he was lying at the foot of his boy's bed, his boy being 22 years old and therefore perhaps no longer technically a boy. But dogs do not update these classifications readily. And he was awake. He was awake because he was aware of something. Not something threatening, not something he needed to bark at or investigate or place himself between his boy and more something larger than that, something he had been aware of at the edges of his considerable awareness. For some months now, a slow and significant change coming, in the way that dogs sense changes coming, without knowing their content, but knowing, with total certainty, their shape. The shape of this change was an ending. Not a terrible ending, not a frightening ending, simply an ending. The kind that comes to all things eventually, arriving not with drama, but with the same quiet inevitability as the turning of the season, the shortening of the day, the first cold morning that tells you, without unkindness, that summer is done. Bramble did not transmit this to the Moon Man in words. He transmitted it as warmth and question. A deep, brown, entirely trusting warmth. The warmth of a creature that has lived well, and loved well, and been loved in return. And within that warmth, a single and perfectly formed question. Not, what will happen, but, will he be all right? His boy. Will his boy be all right? The Moon Man received this and held it for a moment with extraordinary care. Then he sent back, not words, because Bramble had no use for words, but a warmth of his own, golden and specific and certain. The certainty, a yes, boy will be all right. He will grieve, and he will miss you, and the missing will be considerable, but he will be all right because of everything you have given him, which is more than you know, more than any of them ever know. Bramble lifted his grey muzzle, rested it on his boy's foot, and slept. The second animal was a cat. Her name was Clementine. She was 4 years old, entirely orange, and she was sitting in the middle of a kitchen floor in a house in the west of Scotland at 20 past midnight, staring at a spot on the wall approximately 18 inches above the skirting board, with an expression of profound philosophical difficulty. Her communication to the Moon Man was characteristically complex. Cats, the Moon Man had long since established, do not transmit simple questions. They transmit situations, rich, textured, layered situations, full of detail and qualification and contradiction, in which the actual question, if there is one, is buried somewhere in the middle, like a small stone in a complicated meal. Clementine's situation, as received by the Moon Man on this particular night, contain, among other things, a strong opinion about the arrangement of the furniture in the sitting room, a mild grievance regarding the timing of her evening meal, a detailed assessment of the relative merits of the 3 different sleeping locations available to her, and somewhere toward the end, almost as an afterthought, a genuine and rather touching concern about the woman who lived in the house with her, who had been sitting alone in the evenings more than usual lately, and whose quality of lap had changed in a way Clementine could not precisely identify, but found troubling. The Moon Man disentangled the genuine concern from the surrounding furniture opinions with the practice of long experience, and he sent back to Clementine not the answer, but the instruction. Go to her tonight. Clementine considered this for a long moment, staring at the spot on the wall. Then she stood, stretched, in that long and utterly committed way that only cats stretch, as if stretching were the most important thing they had ever done, and they intend to do it properly. Walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, and pushed open the bedroom door. The woman in the bed, who had not been sleeping well, and who had been lying in the dark doing that particular kind of awake that feels indistinguishable from loneliness, felt the familiar weight land beside her, felt the warmth of it settle against her side, heard the slow and steady and entirely self-satisfied purr begin. She put her hand on Clementine's back, and the quality of the dark changed. The third animal, and the Moon Man, smiles in his way when he thinks about the third animal, was a hedgehog. His name, insofar as a hedgehog can be said to have a name, was not known to anyone but himself, which is to say, it was not known to anyone at all. Hedgehogs being private. He was approximately 3 years old, and approximately the size of a very large apple, and he was currently lost. Not dramatically lost. Not irretrievably lost. Simply, in a garden he did not recognize, having taken a wrong turn somewhere near a compost heap, and ended up here, among unfamiliar smells and unfamiliar grasses and an unfamiliar fence that he had now investigated from every possible angle and found impenetrable. His communication to the Moon Man was cool, economical, as hedgehog communications tend to be. It was simply the feeling of being in the wrong place, small, specific, entirely without drama. The hedgehog equivalent of, "Excuse me, I appear to have taken a wrong turn. I wonder if you could help." The Moon Man, who is, among all his other qualities, very good at hedgehogs, sent a small and specific warmth in the direction of the eastern corner of the unfamiliar garden, where a gap in the fence existed that the hedgehog had not yet found. Not a word, not a dream, simply a feeling, a small golden pull. This way. The hedgehog considered this for a moment, in the methodical way of hedgehogs. Then he turned and trundled eastward. He found the gap in 3 minutes. He was home before midnight. And the Moon Man, above all of it, above Bramble and his boy, and Clementine and her woman, and the small determined hedgehog navigating his way home, settled back into his crescent, with that warm and golden face, tilted just slightly downward. Receiving, always. Receiving. Now, of all the people in the world who knew about the Moon Man, and there were, as we have established, a great many of them, there was one who knew him best. Her name was Nora. She was 92 years old. She lived in a small cottage on the western coast of Ireland, not far, as these things go, from Seamus Connolly's hillside, though neither of them knew this, in a cottage that had belonged to her mother, and her mother's mother, and before that, to a great-grandmother whose name had been almost entirely swallowed by time, but whose roses, inexplicably, defiantly, still bloomed every June against the south-facing wall, remained. Nora was small. Not small in a frail way, so small in the way of someone who had always been compact and economical in their physical presence, taking up exactly as much space as they required, and not 1 inch more to... and who had, over 92 years, become more so. Refined, perhaps, was the better word. Distilled, as if time had been working on her, the way time works on certain things, removing what was not essential and concentrating what was, until what remained was entirely Nora. She had known about the Moon Man since she was 4 years old, when her grandmother had shown him to her. The same grandmother, it should be noted, who had also shown the Moon Man to Rosie, because time, in the west of Ireland, tends to move in circles rather than lines. She had spoken to him, regularly and without ceremony, for 88 years since, through the loss of her parents, and the finding of her husband, and the raising of her children, and the loss of her husband, and the long, good, quietly extraordinary years since. She had spoken to him, not always with questions, sometimes simply to talk. On this particular night, Nora was sitting in the chair by the window that had been her chair for 40 years. In the specific and unself-conscious way of a person sitting in a chair that has long since learned the shape of them. She had a blanket over her knees, knitted by her youngest daughter, who had her grandmother's roses in her garden now, and her mother's eyes, and a cup of tea on the table beside her that was, unlike Eowif's, still warm. She was looking at the crescent. She had been looking at it, in one form or another, for 88 years, and it looked back at her, as it always did, with that warm and settled expression that she had long since stopped trying to describe to anyone, because the words available to her, and she had a considerable command of words, were simply not adequate. "Well," she said, "to the crescent." This was how she always began, not with a greeting exactly, more an acknowledgement, the way old friends acknowledge each other when they have been apart for a little while, not with the formality of strangers, and not with the excess of people who feel the need to perform their fondness. Simply, well, here we are, again. "I have been thinking," she said, "about the roses. The Moon Man. Who knew, of course, exactly what she'd been thinking about the roses, and a great deal else besides. Listened. With Nora, he always listened first. She did not need his answers in the way that most people needed his answers. She had been living long enough and attentively enough that she had arrived, at 92, at a place of considerable self-knowledge. She knew what she thought. She knew what she felt. She knew what she valued and what she did not value, and the difference between the two, which is, the Moon Man had observed, a distinction that takes most people the better part of a lifetime to make clearly, and some people never. What she needed from him, what she had always needed from him, since she was 4 years old and her grandmother showed him to her, was company. The particular and irreplaceable company of being heard. "The roses will bloom again in June," she said. "They always do. I do not know how. They're older than anything in this garden, and they show no sign whatsoever of becoming any less so." She paused, sipped her tea. "I find that very comforting," she said. I wanted to say that. "I find it enormously comforting that certain things continue, regardless." She looked at the crescent for a long moment. "Like you," she added, quietly, without sentiment, with the simple and plainly stated truth of someone who's had 92 years to decide what they believe, and has decided, clearly and without apology. The Moon Man received this, as he received everything from Nora, with a quality of attention that was different from the attention he gave to anyone else. Not more, not less, simply different, older, more seasoned. The attention of two beings who have been in each other's awareness for a very long time and have accumulated between them a kind of understanding that does not require much. He sent her not an answer, because she had not asked a question, not a warmth exactly, because the warmth between them was so long established. It had ceased to be something sent and received, and become, instead, simply the quality of the air between them. He sent her a light. The moonlight through the window of the cottage shifted just slightly, in the way that moonlight shifts when a cloud moves across the sky, except that there were no clouds. It gathered itself, that silver gold light, into a particular quality of brightness that fell across Nora's hands where they rested on the blanket over her knees, and across the cup of tea on the table beside her, and across the roses on the south-facing wall outside the window, bare now in their winter sleep, but unmistakably alive. Nora looked at her hands in the moonlight. She looked at the roses. She looked back at the crescent. "Yes," she said, simply, as if the light had said something, and it had, in the only language the Moon Man and Nora had ever really needed between them, and she had understood it completely. She finished her tea. She folded her hands in her lap, and she looked at the crescent for a long and perfectly contented while, not thinking anything in particular, not needing anything in particular, simply there, present at the window in the way she had been present at windows all her life, with the full and unhurried attention of someone who has learned, over 92 years of careful practice, that being here is enough. More than enough. Above her cottage, the crescent held its place in the sky. Below it, the old woman and the moon man kept their long and comfortable silence together, as they had kept it for 88 years. The roses, dark and bare and entirely untroubled on the south-facing wall, waited for June. There is a time between the hours of 3 and 4 in the morning when the world grows very still, not silent, never entirely silent. The world is not a place that does silence completely, and the moon man, who has listened to it for longer than anyone, would not wish it to. The sea continues, the rivers continue, the wind, where there is wind, moves through whatever it finds to move through, trees and grasses and the spaces between buildings, with the same unhurried thoroughness it brings to everything. Owls call, foxes move through the dark with that particular purposeful silence of creatures who have decided that silence is their element. But the human world, the particular frequency of the world that people make, grows quiet. The last of the late night walkers have gone home. The early morning risers have not yet begun. The warriors, most of them, have finally, exhausted by the effort of worrying, given in to sleep. The questions, most of them, have been asked and received, and answered or held or gently redirected. And the askers are resting now, their faces smoothed by sleep into something younger and less burdened than the faces they wear by day. These are the hours. The moon man's favorite hours. He would not have said this, perhaps, in the early part of his long tenure in the sky, in those first centuries, before he had fully settled into the crescent, before he had entirely found his rhythm with the world below. He found the busy hours more interesting, the hours of maximum activity and maximum need, when the questions came thick and fast, from every direction simultaneously, and the work of receiving and responding required everything he had. But time, and he has had considerable time, changes what a person values. Even a person who lives in a crescent moon. Now, in these deep and quiet hours between 3 and 4, he finds something he did not find in the busy hours, something that is perhaps the truest version of what he is and what he does. Because in the quiet hours, what comes to him from the world below is not questions. It is sleeping. The sound, or rather, feeling of the world at rest. And this is the thing the moon man values most. Not the questions, not the answers, not even the moments of connection, as extraordinary as those are, when his warmth reaches the right person at the right moment, and something in them eases. What he values most, what has always been, if he is honest, the deepest purpose of everything he does, is this: the world at rest beneath him. Seamus Connolly sleeping deeply in his stone farmhouse, the knot in his chest gone. Wife sleeping in her city apartment, dreaming her garden dream, her hands uncurled on the pillow, the tension around her eyes released. Rosie sleeping magnificently in her owl-patterned duvet, the biggest question she has ever asked, tucked safely inside her, like a lantern, lit. Bramble sleeping at the foot of his boy's bed, grey muzzle resting on familiar feet, warm and assured. Clementine sleeping against the side of her woman, purring in that deep and self-satisfied way of a cat who has done what was required and considers herself entitled to the warmest available spot as a consequence. The hedgehog, home now, curled beneath his familiar hedge, small and round and exactly where he ought to be. And Nora, who has finally gone to bed at midnight, which is late even for her, sleeping in the room she has slept in for most of her extraordinary life, the moonlight moving slowly across the wall above her, the roses outside, waiting for June. The moon man looks at all of them, at all of the sleeping world below his crescent, the sleeping people in their sleeping houses, the sleeping animals in their various warm and chosen places, the sleeping fields and the sleeping gardens, and the sleeping hillsides holding the sleeping villages in their long, dark arms. And he feels something that is larger than satisfaction, and quieter than joy, and more permanent than either. Something that has no precise name in any language he knows, and he knows a great many languages. Closest he has come, and he has had considerable time to consider this, is the word that a very old language, spoken now by very few people, on the western edges of the world, uses for the feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what you are supposed to do, in the company of exactly the right world. He settles back into his crescent, those large and capable hands resting loosely in his lap, that warm and golden face tilted just slightly downward, those receiving eyes closed. not sleeping, never sleeping, simply present, as he has always been present, as he will always be present, above the sleeping world, in his crescent, in the dark, keeping his watch. Below him, on every hillside and in every city and in every small house at the end of every long road, the world breathes in and out, in and out, slow and steady and entirely at rest. Now, if you were to ask the Moon Man, and people have asked him, in various ways and at various hours, across a very great many centuries, what it is that all is knowing, and all is watching, and all his long and patient years above the world have taught him, he would not answer immediately. He never answers immediately. It is not his way. He would settle himself more deeply into his crescent. He would rest those large and capable hands in his lap. He would tilt that warm and golden face slightly upward in the direction of the stars above him, as if consulting them, or simply acknowledging them, the way you acknowledge old companions before saying something important. And then he would say, this, that the thing he has learned, the one thing, the thing beneath all the other things, the thing that remains when everything else has been considered and set aside, is that every life is extraordinary. Not in the way that word is sometimes used, to mean remarkable, or exceptional, or worthy of the particular kind of attention that the world reserves for the famous and the celebrated and the loudly accomplished. In a deeper way, in the way that a single candle flame is extraordinary, not because it is the largest light in the room, but because it is light, because it exists at all, because the fact of its existence, small and warm and brief as it is, is when you consider it properly. And the Moon Man has had time to consider it very properly. Nothing short of astonishing. He has seen from his crescent, across all the years of his watching, lives of every conceivable kind, lives that filled vast stages and lives that filled only a single small room. Lives of great noise and motion, and lives of complete and chosen quietness. Lives that changed the world in ways that history remembered, and lives that changed the world in ways that history never knew about. A word said at the right moment to the right person. A door held open. A letter written and sent. A child shown the moon. These things the Moon Man would tell you, if you asked him, are not smaller than the large and celebrated things. They are the same size, exactly the same size, because size, from where he sits, is not a measure of volume. It is a measure of weight. And the weight of a thing, in his considerable experience, has nothing to do with how many people know about it, and everything to do with how fully it was felt. Seamus Connolly on his hillsides, asking his 4 plain words into the cold night air, carried as much weight as anything the Moon Man has ever received. Rosie at her window, in her owl-patterned duvet, asking the biggest question, carried as much weight as anything the Moon Man has ever been asked. Bramble, grey-muzzled and certain, asking not about himself, but about his boy, carried, perhaps, the most weight of all. The Moon Man holds this thought, as he holds all his best thoughts, for a long and quiet moment. The stars above him turn infinitesimally, imperceptibly, on their ancient courses. The world below him breathes, and he thinks, as he has thought before, and will think again, on every quiet night between now and whatever comes after. How remarkable it is. All of it, every single, small, enormous, candle-bright bit of it. He has a second thing he would tell you if you asked him. A second thing he has learned in all his years above the world, that sits just beneath the first and supports it, the way the roots of the hawthorn support the tree, invisibly, completely, without any need for acknowledgement. And it is this: that the world, despite everything, is kind. Not always. Not in every moment of every day. He has watched enough of those moments to know better than to say that. But in its deep nature, in the long view, in the way that a river is, always, moving toward the sea, even when it bends back on itself, even when it encounters obstacles. The world, in its deep and ancient nature, tends toward kindness, toward connection, toward the open door and the held hand, and the question asked honestly, and the answer given as honestly in return. Toward the farmer who tells his son, "Go." Toward the young woman who asks, "What would I plant?" Toward the small girl who keeps her lantern question lit. Toward the old dog who asks not for himself, but for his boy. Toward the orange cat who goes upstairs when she is needed. Toward the hedgehog, trundling eastward through the dark. Toward the old woman and her roses and her yes. All of them tending toward each other. And above all of them, the Moon Man in his crescent, tending toward all of them. This is the work. This has always been the work. And it is, he thinks, in the quietest hours, when the world breathes slow and deep beneath him, and the stars turn on their ancient courses above, the finest work there is. The night. At this hour, has a quality that no other hour possesses. It is not the quality of early evening, that anticipatory quality, when the day is releasing its hold, and the dark is gathering at the edges, and the world is moving, gradually and with some reluctance, toward rest. It is not the quality of midnight, that particular charged and watchful quality, when the night is at its most, itself, when the darkness is fullest, and the questions are loudest, and the world and all its inhabitants are most aware of the dark. This, the quality of the hours between 3 and 4, when the Moon Man is most himself, and the world is most at rest, is something else entirely. It is the quality of continuance. The feeling, not of a night that is ending, and not of a night that is beginning, but of a night that is simply going on, continuing as nights do, as they always have, as they always will. The Moon Man breathes this quality in, or does whatever it is that the moon man does, that corresponds to breathing. And he lets it settle through him, the way moonlight settles through a thin curtain, slowly, completely illuminating without insisting. Below him, on the western hillside in County Clare, Seamus Connolly sleeps. His large and weathered hands are open on the blanket beside him, the hands that have built walls and pulled lambs and held his children and set his son's shoulders and pointed him, with love so plain and so certain it needed no ceremony, in the direction of his life. They are at rest in the city apartment. Awifi sleeps on her side, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the garden dream still moving through her in slow and fertile waves. The dug beds, the laid paths, the open gate, the seeds, warm in her open hands. Her face, in sleep, is the face of someone who has decided something. It's in the small house at the end of the long road. Rosie sleeps with the completeness that only the very young and the very untroubled, and those who have asked the right question at the right moment, can sleep. Her gap-toothed mouth is slightly open. Her red hair is spread across the pillow in magnificent disorder. Her lantern, inside her, burns on. Bramble sleeps at his boy's feet, warm and certain and complete. Clementine sleeps against her woman's side, purring still, in the lowest possible register of her purr, the one that is less a sound and more a condition, a quality of the air around her, a warmth that is both given and received. The hedgehog sleeps beneath his hedge, curled into that perfect and ancient hedgehog shape, small and round and home. And Nora, in her mother's cottage, in her mother's room, beneath her daughter's knitted blanket, sleeps the sleep of someone who has nothing left undone. Nothing unsaid, nothing ungiven, nothing unloved. The moonlight moves across her wall in that slow and patient arc. It has been moving across walls, all walls, everywhere, for as long as there have been walls to move across. The roses outside wait. The moon man looks at all of them. At this one night's worth of the world, this one small and ordinary and extraordinary night, with its farmer and its young woman and its red-haired girl, and its old dog and its orange cat and its determined little hedgehog, and its 92-year-old woman who said, Yes, to the light. And he thinks, as he always thinks, in these quietest hours, good. That word in his mouth, or whatever it is he has in place of a mouth, contains everything. Every question receive, every answer given, every worry eased, and every dream delivered, and every small golden pull eastward toward the gap in the fence. Every night of every year, of every century, of his long and luminous and entirely contented life above the world. Good. The night keeps on. The stars, those vast and patient lights, turn on their ancient courses overhead. The crescent holds its place, as it has always held its place, in the upper reaches of the dark. And the moon man settled into his favourite curve of sky, hands loose in his lap, face warm and golden and tilted gently downward, keeps his watch. As he always keeps it, through the deep and breathing dark, through the slow and silver hours, through the long and quiet turning of the night. He is there, above you, now. As you rest, as your breathing slows, as the questions, whatever yours may be tonight, begin slowly to loosen their hold. He has received them. Every one. And whatever answer they require, he will find it in his own time, in his own way. For now, there is only this: the dark, the stars, the slow and golden light of the crescent above, and the moon man, warm and knowing and entirely present, keeping watch as he has always kept it over all of you. Sleep now. He has got you.